listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast.
Hey, and we are live, people
We're
of
live.
Guitarland. We are live. It is Phil Walker here today with Mr. Williams
Good evening, gentlemen.
and also Mr. Taylor. So you guys can see how this podcast is going. I must say to everybody, thank you for listening, because I know we've got some listeners far and wide. So a big thank you to you guys for tuning in. We are relatively a new podcast. So yeah, thank you for everybody that does listen. And you're probably noticing a theme that happens every time, depending who does it, who does the intros. But Chris usually does some nice guitar twangy thing, and me and Lee just usually slurp on alcohol.
Actually, on that note, I've got a confession to make, because I had the shock horror realization 15 minutes ago before we came on air that I'm run dry. I'm all out of alcohol.
No way.
So I don't know how much of you two I can take tonight, to be honest.
Well, if it's any consolation, yeah, I've only got half a bottle of port left myself. So.
Oh, we'll never make it through the first half hour. So I'm on soft drinks tonight. So I hope the conversation is riveting. Otherwise, I'm out of here.
Well, it hasn't been before, so I mean, why start now? So yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about vintage guitars. I do believe. I don't think it's going to be really me in the hot seat too much, because I think we've all probably got a lot to contribute to this. But Lee, is there something you want to say?
Well,
You've got something you want to get off your chest?
Funny enough, there is actually. I think we need to make an apology. I'm just checking something here. Yeah, we're right. Okay, we're good to go. So, apologies to the listeners of the podcast. Anyone who listens to us regularly will know that we usually upload on a Monday night. Today is Tuesday, the 23rd of Feb. So we're recording this, and this would normally go out next Monday. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty with yesterday's podcast, didn't we, Philip Walker?
Yeah, you know when somebody says don't touch that button? Well, I just have to touch it, don't I?
So for anyone who was expecting to, if anyone who was expecting to get a podcast delivered to them yesterday, Monday the 22nd of February, and wondered why it didn't show up, and wondered why it has only just shown up at about 6 p.m. this evening, well, do you want to explain, Phil?
Yeah, see, the thing is, I'm really big on analytics and things like that, and because of the guitar show, marketing and analytics is a major part of what we do. And I was yesterday going, oh yeah, I'll have a look at the analytics for the podcast and get really into it. And oh no, wrong password. Oh okay, I'll put that in again. Oh, wrong password. I'll put that in again. Oops, locked out for 24 hours.
I think it was 12 attempts later. Your account has been blocked for 24 hours.
Oh, no.
So yeah, apologies to everybody out there who's listening who was like really deeply upset and.
I was deeply upset, Phil. I was
Oh,
waiting
mate.
for it, and you know, I got really confused. I was thinking, normally it's out by now. Maybe have I advertised this? Have I promoted this podcast? Of course, I must have done it. It happens every week this time.
Is it still
I started-
Sunday?
I started second guessing myself, so this makes a lot of sense.
We are in lockdown, so some people out there might be, they might be sort of finding their days of the week by our podcast schedule. So, yeah, apologies for that. I'm going to clear my own name. It was edited and ready to go, but...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sorry, guys, for completely cocking up your day of the week. My fault, my bad, but hey.
God, it's weird, isn't it, that whole timing thing? Because now it's 8 o'clock, Tuesday, 23rd of February, so people right now could be listening to last week's podcast that's now been online for an hour or so. But by the time they hear this, a week will have elapsed. Ah, my brain! I can't do it. I can't do it.
It's just
So-
Lee. You need a drink. Will you?
I do.
Send your wife out to the off license for crying out loud?
We're about 3 minutes in. I'm struggling already. I'm looking around. I've got nothing.
Come and join me, Lee. I've got some green tea here, mate.
Green. Oh, Chris.
Green tea. That's worse than the cloudy lemonade or whatever he's drinking.
Chris, are you rubbing salt in the wound by telling me that you've probably got a well-stocked liquor cabinet, but you've chosen to drink green tea this evening?
No, I'm actually run dry myself, Lee. I've got no hop house in the fridge, man.
Ah.
I thought actually I've got some Jack Daniels in the cupboard. Nope. There's got to be some Baileys around. Amy loves Baileys. Nope. There's literally nothing. I'm like, what's going on?
I did
wow.
an
Yeah,
essential
it's,
shop in Aldi the other day. I got chocolate and port.
What,
Is that essential shopping?
what chocolate, Phil? Do you go dark chocolate with that? Do you? Or?
Well, and I don't usually have it with that, but my favourite chocolate's white chocolate. In case anyone's
with you
interested, or
there.
wants to buy me a white chocolate Easter egg for Christmas
I'm with you there.
or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. So we were going to talk about vintage guitars a little bit today. Well, we should probably talk about the hype of vintage guitars. Are they worth it? Is it, do they play any good? And maybe even touch on the relic inside, which is going to be my rant for this week, actually.
Okay.
Radio.
Well, this is
So-
something that we stumbled into last week, or for those listening, I can't do it. You know what I mean?
An hour ago.
In the last episode, this is something that we meandered into because we were talking about guitar solos, weren't we? And then that nicely kind of led into the world of vintage guitars, and we thought, hang on, we've opened a can of worms here. Let's save that for another day because there's so much to talk about here. But let's see what we can get into. It's a hot topic.
Okay.
Certainly from my time in guitar retail, not a day went by when there wasn't a discussion about something old, something quirky, vintage, all that sort of stuff. So.
Now the only thing old we talk about on the road's me, isn't it?
Old and quirky.
Old and pickled, yeah, something like that, yeah. Well, I'm going to kind of get it off my chest at the
go for
moment
it, mate,
about vintage guitars that I've owned a few. Well, actually, no, I did something just before we came on air, and I typed in how old does a guitar have to be vintage. And it's quite interesting. A lot of things came up, usually 30 years for a guitar, and it's classed as a vintage. And if that's the case, I've got a few. But a lot of them was saying that it has to be 60s, between 60 and 70. And I'm thinking,
Right.
well, obviously pre-60, but...
Okay, yeah.
And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting because I class 70s and even some early 80s stuff as vintage nowadays.
Likewise.
I mean, yeah, especially for people who are younger than me. I'm 40, 40 something this year. So the 2000s, the 90s, 2000s really seems like yesterday to me. And I don't even class 80s as vintage, but apparently a lot of people class an 80s guitar as a vintage guitar.
But I think there's those iconic periods, aren't there, that you associate as being vintage. Like for me, the early Japanese stuff from the 80s, the Fuji Gen stuff, or the early Squires, and I consider that to maybe be vintage.
It is a perspective thing. You're right, because kids today they look at like music from 2000s as vintage, like some of that stuff.
Right,
that, like you say, feels like just yesterday, but to them it's like it's a long time ago now. So, but then also, Chris, you're right, because you've got different periods. Does vintage simply refer to something that's old, or does it refer to something that's of a quality or of a kind of an iconic status? So, like you said, certain things in the 80s might be holy grail vintage instruments, but then you've got the golden era. Certainly when we talk like golden era for the big brands, the two giants, Fender and Gibson, I guess it's really the 50s and 60s.
50s and 60s,
because I mean, you can get good and bad guitars from any era, but generally it's accepted that both the CBS era and the Norlin era for Gibson and Fender in the 70s were a dip compared to the previous 2 decades, I think. Just because it was the first time that both companies had that kind of a corporate influence that looked at things like cost cutting and how to streamline production, as opposed to just let's make the best guitars that we can.
It's funny. I looked when I was looking for how old's a vintage guitar. Also, another thing kind of went off on one saying that the class, because I think it was very late 60s, late 69, 70, when they went from a nitro to a poly finish. On the guitars, and they're saying that anything poly is not classed as vintage. I thought, well, that's kind of it. It was still made back in 1969, 1970, So, but it's funny, like you say, that people's perceptions of vintage all vary, don't
So
they? There's
different.
people that, if there's a screw being changed on it, then it's not classed as an authentic vintage instrument. It's it's a funny old market, the vintage
It's a minefield. It's a minefield. It's we used to get asked a lot. Someone would come in and go, "Oh, what have you got? Have you got anything old? Got any interesting, anything interesting like that?" And rarely we would, simply because it wasn't our bag. It wasn't our thing. Like you kind of got to be in it. I think in the vintage world to really flourish in it. And if you're a shop, you've got to just put your stamp on it and say we're going to stock a lot of vintage stuff, and then you get vintage. Because I think the average vintage customer is a very different type of. It's not necessarily the everyday player, is it?
No.
And there are so many quirks out there that can define what makes a guitar popular, what makes it unpopular, what makes it a certain price. Price is probably the most tricky thing to discuss when it comes to vintage guitars.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, you do get bargains. You do. Not so much anymore, but you do get people that don't quite know what they've got. In fact, something recently, there was, I forget what it was. It might have been a jazz bass or something on Facebook. And it was this, I can't quite remember the story, so I'm not going to make it up. But somebody that got this jazz bass. They weren't a musician. They didn't know what it was. It was obviously an early 70s jazz bass. It looked, from what I could tell from the pictures, it looked quite original. And someone was saying, they're saying, make me an offer on it. I just really want it gone. It's, I don't know anything about it. And somebody straight away put on there, oh man, you don't know what you've got. You need to go get this thing valued. And I went, damn you, Facebook user.
Oh, wasn't that that story happened at a rehearsal we did? It was our first rehearsal with me in the show. And I think it was Al's story, wasn't it?
Oh, that was another one.
That was another one.
This was the one I saw.
That was a bass as well.
One. Oh, was it? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
that was a bass
maybe it
as
was
well.
the same thing, but me and Al both saw then. Because I definitely saw it. It was a Sunburst jazz bass, black pickguard, and it had a maple neck with the pearloid block inlays.
Oh, lovely.
No, it was a similar story, but it was different. I remember the story now that Al stumbled across that Fender bass. It was a newer Fender bass. It wasn't vintage, but whoever was selling it had no idea what it was, and had just put it up for £100 or something. And it wasn't until someone else stepped in and said, "You're massively underselling this." I think Farnfield thought he was in for a bit of a deal there, even though he's a drummer.
Yeah. I must admit, I wouldn't have. I would have probably said, "Look, I'll give you this much for it, a fairish price, but well under what it was worth."
Well, it is a fair point that it makes you wonder, doesn't it? You hear of these stories within the industry of people discovering, not discovering the guitar, but discovering the value of the guitar, because there's got to be so many amazing vintage instruments out there that have maybe been left as a family heirloom, inherited from parents, grandparents, and as they've been handed down, they've maybe moved into non-musical circles, and so those people now just, if you're not a guitar player and you've got some old rickety, piece of equipment from the 60s. I remember one particular instance of a guy in the shop who came in. I can't remember what he was in for specifically, but he got talking to us, and he was amazed at some of the prices of some of the relic guitars and, the Gibson Custom Shop, that sort of stuff. And he was just saying, I'm amazed that people want that sort of stuff, and I'm amazed that all these 50s and 60s style guitars are still the cream of the crop. And we said, oh yeah, it's the golden era. That's where our heritage is, and that's where all those classic records were made. And he'd been so out of the game for like 2 or 3 decades. I think he said he played back in the 70s or something, and then just literally dropped it and moved into something completely different. He said that he expected to find gadgets and gizmos and like super futuristic. He was shocked that we were still idolizing those designs of the 50s and 60s. So he actually said, if you guys like this sort of stuff, you might be interested to see this old guitar I've got at home. I mean, it's old rubbish, really. You probably wouldn't want it, you young kiddos. It's some old Gibson type thing. And we were like, huh? What? A Gibson? He said, yeah, I think so. It's I don't know. I'll have to dig it out. I haven't seen it in ages. And he said, oh, I've got an old amplifier that goes with it as well. But again, probably out of date now. Some old Marshall thing, I don't know, 60s nonsense, probably, defunct and knackered. And we were just like, sir, you need to bring these items in quickly, just so we can tell you what it is that you've got. And about a week later, he turned up and he had a original, I think it was a 1962, 63 Bluesbreaker, like a JTM. I think it was a combo, and he had the guitar was, I think it was a 330, an ES 330 Sunburst in its original case, and it was, I think it was like a 63, 64. He bought them both in the same period, and used them for, and we were like, wow, do you know what you've even got here? And he insisted that we plug both of them in and test them. I mean, particularly the amp, we were like, this hasn't been turned on for, he said 20 years plus. And we said, look, let's get our amp tech to just check this over before we do anything. And I think he literally walked over, plugged it in and said, nah, just turn it on, fired it up. And it worked. Everything worked on it. It just sprang to life and sounded amazing with this guitar. It was amazing. So then we did a bit of digging and roughly kind of worked out what he was sat on there in a monetary value, and pointed him in the direction of some people who might be interested in taking it off his hands. And he left the shop a very, very happy man. But, literally 2 days previous or a week previous, he was completely none the wiser to what he had.
Yeah.
So
it makes you wonder how many's out there like that.
It's
I've
amazing,
often wondered if we ever had, like a zombie apocalypse and I was the only person left. I think what I'd do is just raid the houses and lofts looking for vintage guitars.
That's where they got to be. He said that. I think the amp was in his garage and the guitar was in his loft or under the bed or something. And there's got to be so many out there, undiscovered.
Oh, there is loads.
Yeah.
My brother's has got a friend in the States. I think he said he picked up a 59 Les Paul. Literally been in someone's loft for God knows how long. They call them attics over there, don't they, or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing. I definitely where they're going to be, aren't they? But we need this podcast is, we need to inform all these people, and they're going to be like, oh, we got a Gibbo something up in the loft, haven't we? Let's go and pull that down. Original 57.
So for the purpose of the people in the podcast, these old Gibbons, they're not worth anything.
No,
So
donate them
if you
to
get
the
in
show.
touch with Phil Walker Guitarist on Instagram, just drop me a DM, and
you'll dispose
and
of it for him.
I'll take it off your hands. I'll replace it for a nice shiny new guitar for you, and a nice shiny new, probably a Line 6 Spider amp or something that you can play with. And I'll definitely I'll help you out there, guys. So remember, fill out PayPal.com or something like that, whatever it is.
That's our new tip jar, isn't it? When we go back on the road.
Yeah.
All right, so it wouldn't be an episode of this podcast if I hadn't made some notes. So I see you two have come prepared with some guitars to play. I've come prepared with some notes. I think I'm in the wrong game.
Maybe hang on, Lee. We've come prepared with some vintage guitars.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that's why I'm guitarless this evening, because I don't own a. The closest thing I own to a vintage guitar is my Casino.
So that's 90s, isn't it?
It's coming up on 30 years. I think it's 28 years old. So if 30 years is the benchmark, then I've got a couple more years, and then it's
a great example because one of the pickups doesn't work. It's a classic example of a vintage guitar.
No, both pickups are absolutely fine, Chris. It's the volume pot that doesn't work.
Yeah, but you see, what do you do, Lee? Do you replace it, and then it's non-original and not worth as much?
Exactly.
I'll give you a packet of crisps for it.
All right. So look, I wrote down today. I just wrote vintage guitars, underlined it, and I just thought of 4 reasons, or tried to categorize reasons why someone might show an interest in vintage guitars or want to own a vintage guitar. So the first thing I put on the list, number 1, I put investment. This was the thing that I got asked about the most. Show me a guitar that will make me some money. That was like almost an everyday question. But the strange thing about that is it's also the greatest barrier to entry, isn't it? For most people, the reason that we probably don't all have vintage guitars or more vintage guitars is simply they're not the sort of thing that you're going to pick up for a couple of £100. Well, not the big names. No. So what do you guys think about that, investing in vintage guitars?
But yes, that's the reason I've got this one. To be honest, I've had a quite, I guess, yeah, I've had a few vintage guitars over the years, but I didn't buy them as investments. Bought them to play them. I've just really briefly, I've had a 72 Telecaster, which actually belonged to Albert Lee. Should never have got rid of that one. No. I have a 74 Telecaster, which I actually did make a lot of money on, but didn't really intend to. And it was awful. It played awful. The frets were knackered. It was just an awful guitar. Glad to see the back of that. And I made some money on it. I've had a 79 Gibson Flying V, which was, 78, sorry, 78 Flying V. I've had an 82 Les Paul Custom, and now I've got this, at the moment, I've had a 78 Yamaha SA1000, Chris.
Oh, they're nice guitars, apparently.
Yeah, I bought that from a very dear friend of mine, Chris. And I've ended up with this 79 Strat in mint condition.
Yeah.
And I was looking for a 70s Strat, as you guys know. I was looking originally because my main squeeze is a 70, I think it's a 75 reissue. It's a Japanese one, like it's in 1985. But I was looking I thought it'd be great if I could find the original, because that's my birth date as well, 75. And I did. I found one in a music shop. 1875, yeah, exactly. Delete. Right. Anyway, so I was looking partially because I thought it'd be really cool, and it's a part of history. It was made the same year I was born, type thing, and obviously for investment. And I found one in a music shop, and it was god awful. It was terrible. I could stick a plectrum between in the neck joint.
Yeah,
I could actually get a plectrum in there. And I was said, oh, look at the state of this. He goes, oh yeah, they're all like that. And I went, no, I've owned quite a lot of 70s guitars. No, they're not. And it was non-trem, and they were asking nearly $4,000 for it as well, which is just stupid. I mean, I think investment is back to the question. Yeah, investment is probably a major thing these days, because a lot of people know what things are nowadays, and I think it's dead easy for. I mean, I don't gig this guitar purely because it probably wouldn't stay on stage long. It'd disappear at some point. Somebody would know what it was and nick it.
Yeah.
And I think if you do take like Joe Bonamassa, I mean, his guitar tech, Mike Hickey, he must be like a Rottweiler, because to have all those guitars on the road, the security must be horrendous.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons as well. I think even if I had the money, I'm not sure if I would plow it all into a vintage guitar, just because I know I'd want to use it, and I would worry about taking it on the road simply for that reason. Stopping over or something, and you'd always have.
But then again, Chris, I've got the other thing that currently my 335 and my Gretsch are worth more than this vintage guitar that I've got now. So I don't. Is it a monetary value, or is it just a future vintage thing?
Well, that is the thing, isn't it, with vintage guitars? I mean, normal production guitars, the grand sort of spread of prices pretty much ranges from your sort of entry level £100 up to talking a few thousand for like top end bespoke stuff. I mean, even master built custom shops and stuff like that, a few thousand. But once you get into vintage guitars, you're now looking at everything from vintage guitars that you can pick up for under £1,000 all the way up to things that you're going to remortgage your house for. So it's a massive thing, and price doesn't always translate to quality, or it's more like an antique kind of thing, isn't it? You're looking for those points in history, or those things that make that guitar special, and then the condition and all that. But what I used to say to people, because they used to come in and, what guitar can I buy that's gonna make me a load of money? I've got £500 and I want you to turn this into 5,000. I said, it's not going to happen unless you've got a crystal ball and you can predict the future. These days, if you're looking to buy something that is going to do well with your money, you probably have to spend quite a lot to really, the guitars now that are worth a lot are already worth a lot. So if you can lay down a big chunk of money, then in another 10 years, that's probably going to have done quite well for you. But other than that, it's the guys that were just fortunate to have purchased things in the past or bought things like my chap I was telling you about earlier, didn't even know what he had. They're the big kind of like, hit the jackpot stories. Really, unless you've got serious money to plow into an already expensive guitar that you're then going to sit on and keep mint and then try and flog in 10 or 20 years, I don't know. I think you can spend on things that you're not going to lose money, and you can get some enjoyment out of those instruments and maybe make a bit. But I just used to get the impression that customers would come in and want me to, make them 50 grand profit on a guitar in 5 years.
Yeah. I know a guy who did that, but whether it was intentional, I don't know. But he got he's got quite a lot of vintage guitars, but he got them at a time when I guess they weren't as cool.
Right.
He's got a couple of 60s Fenders, Gibson, the 70s Gibson, quite a lot of nice stuff, really nice stuff. And he kind of bought them when they were like 500 quid, and that's really what they was worth. And I mean, now, you're talking between 5 and 10 grand each, at least, for the guitars that he's got. So he's done really well, and he's got a lot of them. He's got around 20 of them, I think. And I've got a good idea of what I think is going to be vintage. What is going to be collectible. I've got a good idea. And I don't know if I should say, actually. I don't think I really want to say what I think it is, because then they'll still start maybe disappearing and things like that. Not that my word means anything, but there are a couple of guitars that I'm actually thinking of looking at as investments. Not players, probably won't even get them out of the case, to be honest. But when I look at this guitar that I got, for what I paid for it and what it's worth now, this 79 Strat, I'm not going to say what I paid for it, but I would not get that return in a bank in the time I've had it.
Right, yeah.
No way. So you think, well, there's there's a guitar in the music shop at the moment. It's I think it's an 83 Strat. And I was looking at it going, oh, wow, this is in great condition. Fantastic. And then I looked at it and something didn't look right. The pickups had been changed. And I was like, no. But that guitar is the same price as what I paid for this one.
Right.
Mine's just original 79 mint condition, original case, blah, blah, blah. Nothing changed on it. And then this other one is the same price as what this is. It's an 83 and it's had change out. So already you can see, things that are...
Do you think, though, that although it's true that guitars that are now 10, 20 years old are going to appreciate a little bit, that we're never going to see the same sort of appreciation in monetary value that we see with the 50s and 60s guitars, simply because the 50s and 60s are the 50s and 60s. Like those... And the 70s to a degree, those iconic eras in music are arguably what makes those guitars what they are. So even as we move through time and we gather more guitars that are growing with, my 90s Casino and so on. I mean, there's guitars from the 2000s that in 50 years' time, they will be 50-year-old guitars, but I can't quite see them becoming what those iconic instruments from those iconic times in music have become.
Yeah,
because I just don't think the music industry is what it was. It's all linked, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's like you say, Lee, it's the players attached to these guitars of that iconic period. Hendrix,
we're never going to have another Jimi Hendrix who's there to make a Strat from that era worth what it is today, are we?
No. And the Paul Kossoff, Les Paul, the 50s thing, and we're just not going to have that anymore going forward, I don't think.
But look at this then for a bit of a spanner in the works. David Gilmour recently sold. It was 100 and odd guitars at auction, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he had Strat. It wasn't the first Strat, but the serial number on this 54 Strat was 0001. Okay, that was the serial number of it. It was really well-known Strat. And then his other Strat, his main Strat, the black, they called it the Black Strat. It had different necks on it. It had different hardware, different pickups put in it. I'm not sure what was original on
He's had the same guitar for 20 years, and it's had 5 different necks, 4
different
exactly.
bodies. Council workers' broom, exactly. Yeah. It's like my white Strat in it. But Guess which one got the most money?
I'm going to say it's Blackie.
Was it like 3 million or something? Nearly 3 million the Black Strat got, and it was 1 point something million the other one got, which to me is a more valuable instrument.
It's the association, isn't it, with the player, with the music.
Yeah. You're listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast.
I mean, coming back to that list that I was talking about, so if investment is one aspect, and maybe investment is not, if investment isn't for you, then maybe number 2 is. And I just simply put down inspiration. And what I mean by that is how you feel when you play the guitar. And I know that Al said this, referring to drums as well, because since he got turned on to vintage drums and he's got his Ludwig, and he said that he probably wouldn't go back to, unless he had a specific need, he wouldn't go back to playing new kits simply because of the way those old kits make him feel when he plays and the headspace it puts you in. And I think that's true. Whenever I've played old instruments, whether they've got quirks or not, they certainly put you in a headspace, don't they? They make you play a certain way. And if you can find one that kind of does the right things for your playing, then I guess that's maybe where some value lies.
Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons I picked up that Yamaha, the one I sold you, Phil. Like, the first time I played that, there was a feeling, there was just something. I played differently, and like you say, Lee, I was in a different headspace, and I was like, I don't know what I didn't even think about the vintage side of it. I just there was that feeling. Obviously subconsciously, I know this guitar is 78 from 1978, wasn't it? Is it 78, Phil?
78, yeah.
Yeah. That was obviously playing on my subconscious a little bit, but I knew I needed it.
Yeah,
nothing that
well,
a
you
new
said
guitar
last
could
week,
offer.
didn't you? That Hofner that you've got there. I mean, how
this
old is that?
This is from '64.
Well, there you go. And you said that did something, doesn't it? When you play it.
I haven't put it down. I just keep wanting to play it. It's just it requires a little bit hard. It's quite hard to play at times. It's 7.25-inch radius, so it's not the easiest to bend on or anything. But I just love the effort that you have to put into it. But the sound, I don't even know what these pickups are, to be honest. They're like little mini humbuckers or something, but just sounds. I don't know if I can turn it up, but it's quite loud. It's got some wiring issues, and he's a new
we heard
jack
that. We heard that in last week's episode.
I'm still trying to figure out how the pickups work on it. They work on like a dial. You have to turn the volume, roll the pickup volume off in order to engage the other one. And there is no switching involved. It's quite confusing. But yeah, sounds pretty cool though. And I play it unplugged. It just has a really nice resonance to it.
It seems to me it'd be quite nice for slide, actually.
Yeah,
I was thinking that looks like it's just asking to be set up for slide. Big heavy strings, high action. That would be awesome.
Oh, sorry.
But it's definitely not coming out.
Oh yeah, there you go.
No,
or
but
maybe
you know
it's
what?
just asking to be retired.
No, I think I'm gonna put some money into it. I'm gonna get a new jack input for it. The whammy bar on it's insane.
Yeah, it's
so
cool,
good.
Isn't it?
You ever played a Duesenberg? Those whammy bars on those are
What's the model so that people listening can maybe have a look online?
This is a Hofner Coloramo 2, I think.
Or get a picture of it up on your Instagram, and then when we do the socials, people can go and have a look.
Yeah, absolutely. But it needs a new tuner. One of the tuners got replaced on it, but they're all a bit they're all very unstable. The nut's been replaced, and someone's done a shocking job on that. Had some new frets put in, which haven't been done very well. So it needs a little bit of love. But I think after a few £100 spent on it, it'll be an incredible guitar to
spending a few £100 on that. Bloody hell! I mean, Lee, you could buy a whole new guitar collection for a few £100.
Hey,
never mind, put a '60s one right.
You can't be saying that this week. You know why?
Should we tell the listeners, or should we wait till next week?
Maybe we should wait. Until
I think we should wait
because otherwise we might jinx it.
Okay.
I'm going with you.
Quirks...
It will happen. Trust me.
Oh, okay. Some of those quirks that what you just mentioned in there, Chris, I think that's partly what I mean by that inspiration that you get, that feeling that you get.
Yeah.
There's a sense of a story behind those instruments. That's why I've always wanted, I've said it before on the podcast, that one day to own a vintage acoustic guitar, because they're storytelling instruments, but to have something that's vintage as well, you're just going to look at it and see those bits, like on that one. Oh, well, someone's had to do this, they've had to replace that, and there's all that playing history in it that I guess you can't help but kind of be inspired when you pick it up.
Yeah, and when you say vintage acoustic, do you have a brand in mind? Because I know straight away when you say vintage acoustic, I think Martin off the cuff.
I think Gibson.
I've got a thing. Yeah, I've got a thing for Gibsons. I would love a J45. Vintage
snap.
J45.
Yeah.
Just I would just sit and stare at it and smell it, and I just think they'd be awesome.
I think so. What I would do, I just smell it all day. Something about the smell of an old guitar, isn't it? It's like an old book,
You see, that's one thing I don't get with this 79 Strat that I've got. I don't get that because it is in such pristine condition. It don't feel vintage.
I was actually gonna say that, but I didn't want it to sound like a dig on that guitar. But that guitar is so mint that actually, when you pick it up, you could be fooled into thinking that's a custom shop or something, like not even an aged custom shop. We're talking like NOS finish. It is,
definitely.
It's spotless.
It's sickening. I mean, it's great. It's great value wise, but it's sickening that you kind of want to, like you're saying, Chris, when you play that wreck of a thing, what you've got there.
Hey, come on, man.
No,
don't hold back.
All guitars are beautiful. No, they're not. I've got a rant. Anyway, you want to get in a different. My old 85 Strat feels a lot more vintage than my proper vintage Strat.
It does. It's got more miles on it, certainly, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And the neck on my my other Strat, it feels like it's a 40-year-old guitar. It feels like it. This one,
I get that actually. When I've picked up your Strat a few times, and there's something you get a feeling when you play that guitar. There's something about it.
Yeah.
And I can't put my finger on it. Hopefully, we can conclude what that is today at some point. But
right. So number 3. So investment, inspiration. Number 3, I put as collectability, or that sense of owning a piece of history. And I suppose what I mean by collectability is the addictive side of just the collector's thing, because a lot of collectors aren't players, and they might already be, obviously fairly wealthy because they're into collecting vintage guitars. I've met a few guys who were like that, and it was almost like a hobby. Joe Bonamassa is a good example. Obviously, he's a player, and it's his profession, but it's pretty fair to say that he's well and truly addicted to guitar collecting. He's got a collection that's so vast of both guitars and amps that you can see, in the same way that people collect old comics, he might be into vintage clothing, any of those things. I can see how, if you had the funds, the sort of the train spotting aspect of it could get quite fun. Like us with our records, we love to go to. Listen to me, sound like a veteran record collector. I only got my record player for Christmas, but you know what I mean.
Got 3.
It's fun to go to a record shop and thumb through old records and find goodies. And I guess if you had the funds to do it and you were well into old guitars, it would be that same sense of trying to hunt down, I've got this one, I've got this one, I need to get that one that they released in that year with that finish, and I want it with the case and the case candy. I can understand the addictive part of that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think if we all had the money to spend on vintage guitars, I think we'd all be the same. We'd all have our squeezers that we really wanted, wouldn't it? I mean, I've got an idea of what I doubt I'll keep this 79 forever. I kind of bought it because it was at a great price, and I can upgrade it to, something that I possibly really want. I mean, I'd really love, for some odd reason, a 60s Fender Electric 12, and maybe this will be a trade up to that. Again, nothing. I don't want another Strat really. I've got nice Strats. I've got 2 particularly nice Strats that I'll never get rid of. So I don't need another Strat. So this probably is just a what do they call it? Stepping stone to something else.
Exactly, Phil. You could trade your way to this guitar. Have you heard that recent story of this woman? I can't remember her name, but she's basically trading her way from a hair clip,
wasn't it?
all the way to a house. and she's I think she's at like a brand new car or something right now, or a Range Rover or something. She's just trading her way up. So there you go. And to be honest, that guitar is a great stepping stone, isn't it?
Definitely, absolutely, yeah. And maybe I'll do that. Maybe I will do. I mean, once we can get back out again, because we, the story of Guitar Heroes often gets asked to play at these guitar shows. Like the Birmingham Guitar Show and places like that. Like Britain's Rare Guitars, we did, and maybe if we do that again when we're allowed out again, Boris, we'll. I'll take this along with me and see what I can do. See if I can see if I can trade my way up to something like that. That'd be a good podcast, wouldn't it? Or a good YouTube.
Definitely. On that note as well, should we just say hurrah and just simulate popping some champagne, because the announcement last night, it looks like, fingers crossed, we're on the home stretch, assuming everything goes to plan and there's no more hiccups along the way. We're heading towards a very big light at the end of the tunnel now. So,
well, I've had some very positive conversations today with our promoters. So let's fingers crossed.
Bring it on.
Can I do my rant now? Because I'd really...
Well, actually, let me hit number 4, because I don't know what you're going to say, but I've got a feeling your rant might tie into this quite nicely. So number 4, and the last one on my list, was simply the sound, and it was the argument that the old stuff is better. And that the reason that all those old records sound great is because they were using this fantastic gear, and you hear it a lot that they were making them to such higher standard. Everything was handmade. There was no custom shops because everything was custom, and all those arguments. And then there's the argument of time and age on top of it, that pickups over time developed harmonic content that wasn't there originally, and valve amps that have got aged parts sound richer and warmer. Acoustic guitars that have been played have opened up, and all these arguments. And I think, in my experience, yes, there's some fantastic things out there, and you plug in, but there's equal amounts of things that aren't great. So I don't. Does that lead into your rant at all, Phil? Okay.
Let's find out. Okay. So
Chris, do you want to cue the music?
No, that wasn't my rant. That wasn't my rant. I was just going to do really quickly a quick A/B with this guitar and a newer Strat that I've got.
Okay.
Exact same settings. So let me just.
So obviously no.
Okay. I've got to try to remember what I played.
So that's the vintage. That's
the 79.
Yep.
79 original.
Okay, this may not be in tune. And this is a 50s classic from 2000, Mexican from 2003. Okay, so here we go.
Okay.
There you go. What do you think?
I'm going to throw it over to the listeners and say, get in touch and let us know, because at the moment, me and Chris are only hearing that over Zoom, so we're not hearing the recorded audio. But by the time this goes out, the listeners will hear the actual audio of that.
So that's interesting. Yeah. So comment on that. Let us all know. Okay. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to do a really quick rant. So somebody, go on. Off you go.
Chris, you go for it.
Or maybe we could do like an echo.
Okay. Oh, by the way, talking of echoes and things like that, you guys wouldn't have heard it yet because obviously it's only gone live an hour before this. But the the Hotel California guitar solo over Zoom was amazing. Anyone who's listened to last week's episode will know what we mean. But these guys tried to play Hotel California dual guitar solo over Zoom with all the delays and everything. Yeah. So if you haven't heard that, go and check that out.
I couldn't even finish it.
Should we do it in tandem then, Chris? Should we try and do it together? Yeah.
Okay.
So we go 3, 2, 1.
Cue the music. Phil's rant. What was that? Anyway, we get the point. Oh, God. Right, okay. I'm not going to mention names or anything like that, but I've had a chance this week, and I've played them before. I've had a chance this week to play a very, very expensive custom shop Strat. And And I'm sorry, I do not get the hype. I really do not get what it's all about. I couldn't keep the bloody thing in tune. The relicing was like on the back of the neck. It's just like a 4-year-old had got some sandpaper and gone, oh, I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes. And there was no thought gone into where neckwear would be. The lacquerware, it was a maple fingerboard. The lacquerware on the fingerboard was like, unless somebody has played in E flat their entire life, you know. I mean, it just didn't seem to make. I'm thinking people that can't afford a vintage guitar, you know, may want to go get a relic or something like that. And from my experience of that, don't just, you know, sell a kidney and get a bloody proper vintage guitar if that's what you want. Don't get one of these custom shops, because I tell you what, the ones I've tried ain't worth it. Okay, I'm done.
I completely agree, Phil, to be honest. And for me, the relicing side of things is supposed to share a story with you, which is supposed to kind of connect you with the guitar in some way. And it's just, and I know it's just all fake. Someone's done it just to give a look.
We're opening up a can of worms here. This is another podcast, because I'm going to come right back at you on this.
Yeah,
are you really?
I can see people. I can see that people appreciate the aesthetics of a worn Strat or something, because you know that's what people like in a Strat, I presume. But I don't know, for myself, I like something that's almost like a nice condition, like your 79. You know, for me, I think we share the same view, Phil. I think, but obviously Lee.
So should I think you're kind of hosting next week's podcast. Do you want to kind of make it about that?
What about relicing? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to do that?
Yeah. We can touch on I'll get into relicing with you next week, definitely, if you want.
Okay. But yeah, just to finish that though, I think the Strat that you've got, Lee, that's a custom shop, and I think that's a great example of a custom shop. It looks fantastic, and it's not battered to holy hell or anything. You know, it's just, it looks great. You know?
Yeah, it does. It does. But I am biased.
Yeah,
biased.
Yeah. I mean, I've played your custom shop, Lee, and maybe like again, I'm conscious of time, but maybe a custom shop Strat, something that's relict, still needs to be played in for 10 years before it feels anything like what it's supposed to look like.
I'll say no more than I agree, and we'll touch on this. We'll go into this next week.
Fantastic.
I think it's good.
Okay.
Time to leave it there, I think. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to this podcast. I've certainly enjoyed being here, podding on it, or whatever you call it. I don't know what we're doing.
Podding, is that a term? Podding?
I don't know. I had no idea.
Sounds a bit dodgy to me.
It
podding.
does, doesn't it?
Yeah, with one of those Instagram posts I've been on, I guess. Lee, do the socials quickly.
Right, if you want to find us on Instagram, you can search Phil Walker Guitar, Chris Anthony Guitar, and Lee Troy Guitar. You can go on Facebook, it's Phil Walker Guitarist, Chris Anthony Guitar, and Lee Williams Guitarist. You can find the Story of Guitar Heroes on Instagram and Facebook. You can head to the website www.storyofguitarheroes.com, and you can go to YouTube and search Phil Walker Guitarist to find videos, behind the scenes, and all that good stuff. Please get in touch if you've got any input on vintage guitars. Or anything we've discussed. We love to hear from you, and it will certainly fuel the future episodes. And so next week we'll maybe get into relicing and relic guitars and all that kind of stuff.
Sounds really good.
Nice. And, I should look forward to that.
I'll make sure I've got a nice bottle of something to get us through that one.
I think you should. We need you a bit calmer, Lee. Good grief.
Right.
Thank you all very much for listening, guys. I will see you all next week. Thank you. Goodbye.